The pictures proudly pumped out to the world. European leaders and a NATO chief sat smiling agreeably before the court of Trump. The president who believes he can end the war in Ukraine, and that yesterday he may have made that a couple of steps closer. It was an all-star cast that descended on DC for yesterday's emergency summit.
Hello, everybody.
The president of Ukraine and his heavyweight entourage, including Sir Keir Starmer and 4 more European leaders, plus the president of the European Commission and the Secretary General of NATO. A summit they hailed a breakthrough, though delivering scant detail of what was actually discussed, let alone decided.
Well, President Trump, we want to thank you so much for joining us this morning. We know
this morning, calling into Fox News, President Trump revealed a little of what military assistance he was prepared to put on the table.
We've got the European nations, and they'll front-load it, and they'll have some of them, France and Germany, a couple of them, UK. They want to have, boots on the ground. We're willing to help them with things, especially probably if you could talk about by air, because nobody has the kind of stuff we have.
What kind of assurances do you feel like you have it won't be American boots on the ground defending that border?
Well, you have my assurance, I'm president.
So no American boots on Ukrainian ground, but the possibility of air support, a key desire of European nations. And also the prospect of bringing together Presidents Zelenskyy and Putin, as discussed in a post-summit phone call to Moscow.
At the end of the meeting, I was going to call President Putin, and President Putin expected it. We had a very good call, and I told him that we're going to set up a meeting with President Zelenskyy, and you and he will meet, and then after that meeting, if everything works out, okay, I'll meet and we'll wrap it up.
Last night, President Zelenskyy posted this highlight reel to social media. And those shy on detail, European leaders are hailing yesterday as a success. That success down at least in part to a simple strategy.
I really want to thank you, President of the United States, dear Donald.
The path is open. You opened it.
Something has changed thanks to you.
Yesterday's summit was about diplomacy on steroids, platitudes and flattery, and talk of what post-peace security measures might look like. But what we did not hear, what gets you to that peace, is any sense of any concessions either side might be willing to make. And that will be the biggest and toughest issue in these negotiations. President Zelenskyy used his time in the Oval Office yesterday to talk Trump through the shape of Ukraine, but made no ultimatums.
For me, this is a very sensitive topic. I wanted to talk about it. I think the president heard me, and he saw it. We had different moments, but this is important information. That's why the matter of territories is a matter that we will leave between me and Putin.
We have never talked about seizing any territories. Neither Crimea nor Donbass as territories have never been our goal. Our goal was to protect the Russian people who have lived on these lands for centuries, discovered these lands, and shed blood for them.
The Russian response to yesterday's talks. According to Ukraine's Air Force, Russian forces launched 270 strike and decoy drones last night, as well as 5 ballistic and 5 cruise missiles across Ukraine, including at these populated civilian areas. The path to blood-soaked peace is unlikely to be short.
Paul McNamara reporting. Well, our US editor, Anushka Astana, joins me now from the White House. Anushka, a little bit quieter there today. What's going on?
Well, I think lots of people see this as progress at the moment, certainly on those security guarantees. Europeans say before this, actually, America wasn't really responding on that, but now they are. I liked how one diplomatic source put it to me. This is how Donald Trump's America works. If the emperor says, I like that, then the green light goes on and the work starts. And actually, I've just come out of the White House briefing room where Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said just that Donald Trump had ordered officials to start on this. There'll be a NATO meeting tomorrow, and then the coalition of the Willings planning teams are meeting their US counterparts as well. So that is progress, as you heard from Donald Trump himself. No troops on the ground, but she did not deny there could be troops in the air, perhaps air support. Europeans never really expected American troops on the ground, but they did expect European ones. And in that, we have a bit of a problem. Even optimistic officials saying to me, there is a trust problem with Vladimir Putin. He said to Donald Trump he was pro a security guarantee, or he could stomach it perhaps, but now Russia saying no troops on the ground at all. He also sounds more cautious perhaps about a bilateral meeting. There were reports this afternoon that perhaps that could happen in Budapest, although they were not giving anything away here in the White House. And then there is the other problem, the question of land. I saw our Prime Minister Keir Starmer as he left those talks last night, and I said to him, has President Zelenskyy accepted the principle that President Trump now clearly supports, that ceding land may be the price of peace?
Well, in terms of the approach that's taken on territorial issues, what I've said throughout and being clear with President Zelenskyy is that in the end has to be a matter for him. And that's why we've had the principle throughout, no decisions about Ukraine without Ukraine. Now, the development today in relation to President Trump talking to President Putin and organising a bilateral is recognition of that principle, that the two parties need to talk about this, but with a trilateral. President Trump also agreed as an outcome from this meeting. But it's coupled with, and you can't separate the two, the question of security guarantees, because those guarantees are so important to the process as a whole. And today was a real breakthrough because we had worked up guarantees from the Coalition of the Willing. I'm really pleased about that. But I was always clear that we needed the US as a backstop, as part of that guarantee, to make sure that Ukraine, Europe and the UK are safe and secure as we go forward. Today, a breakthrough on that, and we've now commissioned our teams to work at speed and urgently on working up those guarantees. Now, they were the two outcomes that we, the United Kingdom, wanted and planned for out of today, and that's why it was a good and constructive meeting.
But if President Zelenskyy does not want to cede land, you will back him?
Well, all matters of territory are a question for President Zelenskyy. I think that's a very clear principle that I've held, that everybody recognises, and I think it's very important to read in, if you like, to the development today on bilateral meetings and trilateral meetings, that is a recognition that Ukraine must be at the table, and ultimately it is a decision for Ukraine.
And the question of land is no trivial matter. The German Chancellor said, imagine giving up Florida if you're the US. To put it in a British perspective, the Donbass is the equivalent of Wales and Yorkshire and then some. But the White House are triumphant at the moment. They keep quoting all that praise from Europeans. They say that this is the Donald Trump peace effect.
Anushka, thanks very much indeed. Well, in Russia, the universally pro-Kremlin media have tried to downplay Volodymyr Zelenskyy's meeting with Donald Trump and European leaders, declaring that everyone looked gloomier than a thundercloud. While an op-ed in the state news agency RIA Novosti warned that if future overtures didn't go well, there would be no more truly generous compromises, even threatening Western Ukraine with a headline, "We'll have to go as far as Lviv." Well, joining me now is Andrei Soldatov, who's one of Russia's leading investigative journalists who fled the country in 2020 and is now on Russia's most wanted list. His latest book is Our Dear Friends in Moscow, the inside story of a broken generation. Andrei, it's good to see you in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
When you hear what the Kremlin media was saying today and how people in Moscow were crowing about the Alaska summit and downplaying what was going on in Washington, and then you contrast that with the kind of love fest yesterday in DC and Trump on the phone to Putin and all this, are we talking about two completely different universes here?
In a way, the thing is that this war has never been only about Ukraine for the Kremlin. It's been partly about ideology. It was also about the message that Moscow wanted to get back on the world stage and to get Russia back as a superpower, which also includes having conversations and talks with the Americans as equals. And that's exactly what Putin got in Alaska. But he also wanted to tell his audience in Russia that the Europeans had no agency, that Ukraine and just nothing but a state not a real state, but a client state of the United States. And again, that's the message the pro-Kremlin media had been promoting, and that didn't change because of the summit in Washington.
I mean, it's been Russia's policy for a long time now to prize Trump away from the Europeans, to prize the Europeans away from Zelensky. That doesn't seem to have worked so far.
Well, it depends, because Putin already has achieved what he wanted from this new round of peace talks. He got his
equal talks with the American president, the superpowers together on the red carpet in Alaska.
Absolutely, and because he believes that his army is winning on the battlefield, he's not really interested to get a real peace deal.
So if he's not interested in a peace deal, if he thinks that he's winning, if he still doesn't want Ukraine to be an independent sovereign nation state, then the Europeans and Trump, they're barking up the wrong tree. I mean, it has to be something much more robust, doesn't it, to convince Putin?
Absolutely. And the game of Putin now is to try to shift the blame and to say, look, it's not about me. I'm all for peace. I have no problem with Trump. It's all because of the Europeans. It's all because of Zelensky. We could have a proper conversation between us, the United States and Russia. And let's forget just to make Ukrainian question a problem, but quite an isolated problem.
Your book is about a lost generation in Russia. What do normal Russians, ordinary Russians, the citizens that we never really hear from, what do they think about this war?
Well, it's a combination of two things. First, there is a feeling of depression right now in many Russian cities. Depression, because people they're very tired of this war. And the drones attacks, they have a big effect on the way people talk about the war.
So that's made a difference, the Ukrainians bringing the war to Russian doorsteps.
Absolutely. Yeah. Before the drone attacks, lots of the Russians, they tried to ignore this war, to deny its existence, that nothing actually happened. We have our own life as it was before 2022. We have some restrictions, but they're not really important. But now you have these drone attacks. You have these disruptions at Moscow and other cities' airports. It's a big deal. You have lots of footage on social media about these explosions, and it has its effect.
So they want the war to end?
Yes.
But on Russia's terms, rather like the president?
To some extent, yes, because first of all, they believe that Putin is there forever. So they don't believe that there might be any change in Moscow. And also, of course, there is this sense that Russia was not treated fairly. Lots of ordinary Russians believe that, look, we got these sanctions, and why they blame us. And then you have all this game about whataboutism. Why the Americans were not punished for Iraq or Afghanistan? Why we only to suffer?
But do Russians care about Crimea? Do they care about the Donbass? Do they care? Do they really care whether Zelensky, the so-called Nazi, is running the government in Kyiv?
Not really. I think that the names of many Ukrainian cities and towns are absolutely unfamiliar to many Russians, but they do care about the position of Russia in the world.
But 1 million men have died or been maimed in this war. That's a huge number for an idea.
Yes, but when you cannot have a proper national conversation, because there is a sense of repression in the country. You have so many people sent to jail just by raising a question about the war. Well, people are confused.
Okay. Andrei Soldatov, thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
Well, joining me now from Kyiv is the former Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister, Volodymyr Havrylov. Thank you very much for coming on the program, Volodymyr Havrylov. You heard what Andrei Soldatov just said there. The Russians are tired. They want the war to end. But also they were broadly speaking in favor of these war aims. Do you think that this is the right moment for Zelensky to try and get some kind of deal out of Vladimir Putin?
I think Russia is in a worse position now after the beginning of the invasion in 2022, because they're facing a huge economic challenges inside the country this year. And they have no strategic successes on the ground. Yes, there are some kind of tactical advances on the front line, but they are not strategic ones. That's why the key issue for them now becomes how to sustain the economy in this war, how to pay people who are not taking part in combat actions, how to pay even salaries to military. It's all about money now this year. And they have to do something with that. And there is rising understanding inside the Russian elite that without any kind of solution in this conflict, they will face a real strategic disaster next year.
Okay, but at the same time, Vladimir Putin has the extraordinary luxury of running a propaganda machine and an unfree press. So he can more or less try and sell whatever victory he wants to sell to a Russian population that's tired of the war. And at the same time, Mr. Zelenskyy can also sell a kind of victory to the Ukrainian people, because even if he's lost some land, the country is still independent, it is still democratic, it is still viable, it might join the EU. Isn't that compromise the space in which you can find an end to this dreadful war?
It's not easy for Putin to find a compromise in this war on terms not related to his initial
What about Zelenskyy?
goals. Zelenskyy is a representative. He's a president of the country, but he is representing civil society of the country and our military. And we have very rooted mood and enthusiasm inside our military and civil society to defend the territorial integrity of Ukraine.
Right.
So it's not about the position of the president of Ukraine. He knows and he feels the moods inside the population and society in Ukraine. And the people here, they just express the understanding of the red lines, so-called red lines, and any kind of resolution with Russia on this war.
Right.
It's all about preserving our key values. It's all about our territories.
But on that note, what do you think that President Zelenskyy, whose position is weaker now than it was a year ago because of the row over investigating corruption, etc., what do you think that he can realistically sell to your people, to his people, in terms of a compromise on territory, on security, on joining NATO or the EU?
First of all, he has to support the mood of population in terms of the territorial integrity of Ukraine. It means any kind of resolution should not include the losing territories of Ukraine. So we can only tell in future if any kind of deal is on the table about the occupied territories, temporary occupied territories for a certain period of time. At the same time, no changes with inside Ukraine following the demands of Russia on a Russian-speaking population, status of Russian language, or Russian church in Ukraine. Also red lines. And also it's about the will of Ukraine to join any kind of European security arrangements like NATO or something else. Of course, for the president of Ukraine, it's not easy to communicate all these messages from the meeting in the White House to our population. Everybody is asking, what is the real demand of Russia in this conversation?
All right, we're going to leave it there. Volodymyr Havrylov, thank you very much indeed for coming on the program.
Thank you.